Hello, everyone. I hope that you can hear me okay. We're going to go ahead and get started. I appreciate you being on the call today, and I think that Kate has popped into the message there that we'll be taking Q&A after the presentation. So my name is Carrie White. I am the Interim Associate Director for Housing and Residence Life Administration, and we have some folks who are online running slides and who will help answer questions, as well as Dr. Cotton, who will also be available to answer some questions and finish up the presentation with me. So we're going to talk just a little bit about what the scope of this information session is. I'll give you some background information, show you some data, talk about the application phase, details of that, and then we'll get to your questions. And we did ask you to submit questions ahead of time, and we have some of those, and we're going to go ahead and respond to them and then take any additional questions here on the call. So I just want to be clear about the scope of our session today. We're going to talk really about what our plans are to address the impact of increased undergraduate enrollment in campus housing. So we really can't speak to decisions about increases in enrollment overall for the Institute or how that might impact other areas of campus life. So just to give you a little bit of background, undergraduate enrollment has increased for the past 5 years, and that's across first year new transfer students as well. And in part, this increase is so that we can grow the underrepresented groups on our campus and also increase our ability to have more undergraduate students take advantage of a Georgia Tech education. So as you see here, the increase includes rural Georgia as well as students in the Black and Hispanic communities, first generation, and then women. So for the first time in Institute history, we are at 40% of our undergraduate population are women, and that's very exciting. And so, you know, we as Housing and Residence Life want to support this increase in undergraduate enrollment, and so that means that we have to make some decisions and some changes in the way that we do our processes. And what we did was we really looked at what undergraduate enrollment and the Institute is talking about and their priorities. And really, it's this commitment to inclusive excellence by enrolling, you know, record numbers of undergraduate students from around the state. Georgia, you know, is a part of that, the nation, and of course the world. So I want to give you a little bit of data and help you understand how we came up with the numbers that we came up with and the decisions that we've made. So over the last 10 years, and we're going to take out the COVID year of 2020 and 2021, and talk really about the last 10 years and how students have chosen to live at Georgia Tech. So 96% of enrolled students have chosen to live on campus. Of our 96% of our first year enrolled students, and that we've seen that number really stay steady up until, of course, we had to make changes in how many students could live on campus for COVID. From first year to second year, students choosing to live on campus, out of that 96% is about 64% of our students making that choice each year. So we look at these numbers and we look at the increase in enrollment, and we ask ourselves, if all students can't live on campus, all students that want to, how do we identify and then ensure that students who are most in need of our services have access to on-campus housing? So we looked at the data that we have available to us. This year we had just over 3,000 first-year students, new first-year students who chose to live with us. That is not 96% of the enrolled class this year. It was about 92, about 92%. So with the increase in enrollment for next year that is anticipated at 96%, we are expecting 3,450 first-year students to live on campus. Now, could that number be less? Of course it could. It could be less than that. It could be a little bit more, but that's what we're anticipating and planning for. For our rising second years, we're expecting about 2,000, just over 2,000 students, and then you can see the additional numbers there. So as the enrollment increases, then it has this domino effect on those upper class numbers as well, right? And that's already been happening. So you saw that over the last 5 years, we've already increased a significant amount of undergraduates on campus. And so that's already adding to the number of students who want to live here. So we looked at these numbers and we said, well, if we know, if we can identify where we anticipate those increases, and then how do we plan for and create a process that will allow students who we think really need and know really need our services the most. And this is based on research, it's based on experience, it's based on folks who are doing a lot of work in student housing as well as the student campus life experience. And so we made some decisions about how we would accept applications. So for our current bed types, the types of beds that we currently have on campus, you can see those numbers there, and that's much less than even what we currently house when we look at the traditional beds. If only the traditional beds were first-year beds, then we would already have quite a deficit there for first-year students being able to live with us. But we already have more than that, right? We have just over 3,200 students, first-year students this year. So they are also living in suites, right? And then you can see the rest of the numbers there. So how did we looked at the numbers, the populations of students who we think really need to live with us the most, and we said, well, how can we create a process that allows that to happen? And then gives other students the opportunity to fill in. And so we looked at our primary considerations being first year, new transfer, new grad. So new students, brand new to Georgia Tech, never have been to Georgia Tech before. Rising second years, because we know they still need those continued services that they receive in housing, and that a large percentage of those students do want to stay on campus. We also look at need-based students, students who are financially need-based, who may need the cost savings of on-campus housing. And then, of course, students who need to break a contract mid-year. So if you're graduating in December or you're studying abroad or co-op interning in the spring, it's really difficult to get out of a lease mid-year. But living on campus, you have that flexibility and that ability. So we can't know who those students are as early as students need to apply, but what we will be doing is reminding you all that if you're planning to graduate in December or study abroad co-op intern in the spring, that you really truly need to apply as soon as your phase opens so that you can ensure that you have a space on campus. So those application phases, so this has been sent out in email, it's on the website, we have this information out there. Our plan is to open the returning student housing application, and by returning student, I mean current Georgia Tech students. So this is not new students, not first year, new transfer, new grad. These are students who are already enrolled at Georgia Tech, whether they live on campus or not. That's a returning student. And so we're going to open the application for rising second year students on January 31st. So that is students who are currently a first year who will, who started school in the fall. They will be eligible to apply for housing for the academic year 2022-23, beginning January 31st. On February 14th, we will add current residents. So rising second years will still be able to apply, but current residents will then be able to start applying. Current resident would be anybody who has an academic year contract. So even if you study abroad, intern, co-op in the spring, you're still considered a current resident. So you would be eligible to apply beginning February 14th. And then on February 21st, we would open that application to anyone else. Anyone else who is a currently enrolled Georgia Tech student would then be eligible to apply. We will turn the wait list on when we reach capacity. So we will be holding some space for transfer students and grad students. And so when we reach, when we have all the applications and that we have space for, we're going to turn the wait list on, and students can still apply and they'll still be able to complete the contract, but they'll be given a wait list number. And it takes us about 24 hours, business hours, so business day, to get you your wait list number. That doesn't mean anyone's getting in front of you. It's still in the order in which you signed your contract, but we do have to assign that number, and we'll assign you a wait list number and you'll be on the wait list. And as soon as a space opens up, we'll take you off the wait list. If you cancel while you're on the wait list, there's no cancellation penalty for canceling off the wait list. And so you can stay on that wait list and work on alternative housing, or wait for something to open up. Now, because we are waiting for students to be admitted, new transfer, new grad students to be admitted, then it could be the summer before we're able to get everyone to take students off the wait list. Will some spaces open up in the spring? Of course they will. We'll have students who cancel shortly after they apply, or a month after they apply, or 2 months after they apply. So some students at the high end of that wait list will probably come off pretty quickly. But if your number is lower, then I would expect that it would take longer, or you might not get a place on campus. And so on February 21st, we'll open up roommate selection for everyone who has a signed contract who is not on the wait list. And then on March 8th, students who have a contract who are not on the wait list, who would like to stay in their current room, will be able to choose to stay same. That's a traditional part of the process. You're able to say, I'm in North Ave East 121B and I want to stay here for the fall, or I want to live here again in the fall, and you'll be able to select that and choose that room again. Now, if you're on the wait list, you will not be able to do that. If you did not apply for housing, you will not be able to do that. You must have a valid signed contract and not be on the wait list. And then when self-assign begins March 9th, we'll start with the living learning communities. They have designated space, so we get them out of the way first. We'll do the grad students, and then everyone else will begin to self-assign on March 15th. Now, the self-assign process, the stay same process, the roommate selection process, none of those processes are changing from what you're used to. We're not making any changes right now to those timeline, or the timelines are slightly later than they would traditionally be, but other than that, there's no change to the actual process itself as far as who gets to self-assign when. That's still based on your Georgia Tech credit hours. And we're not changing any of that structure at all. So I think that we have some questions and answers from the survey results. So we asked you in an email to go ahead and send us your questions, and we have looked at those and try to put the ones that were similar together and respond to them. So we had a lot of questions about, I'm living in blank. Pick a building. I live in North Ave and I want to live there again next year. Is that possible? Basically asking, is this going to change that process of stay same? And there were a lot of questions that used the word, since I'm guaranteed, or I have been guaranteed a space, be able to stay in the same room in the past, will I be able to do that again? So I want to answer this very clearly. Students are never guaranteed a specific place in housing. That's very clearly stated and explicitly stated in the contract. We do try very hard to give students the option to stay in their current space when it's possible. And so it's not always possible, right? That's not always an option. That process has not changed. If it's an option, you will still have that option, assuming that you have a valid signed contract and are not on the wait list. We are planning for all of the traditional and almost all of the suites to be reserved for first-year students. So this is one of those cases where if you're an upper-class student currently living in Harris, let's say, which is a suite-style building on East Campus, and you wanted to stay in that same room for next fall, that probably would not be possible. This would be a case where you would not have that option because we're going to hold that space for first-year students. So you would have to choose a different location. Right. So in that case, when we are unable to allow students to stay in their same room, we will offer them the opportunity to self-assign earlier. So we'll give you priority self-assign. That doesn't mean you'll be the very first person to self-assign, but you will have the ability to go earlier than what you might normally have, unless of course you're a fifth-year senior with lots and lots of hours and credit and able to go first anyway, right? But we will make every effort to allow you the opportunity if it's possible. This process has absolutely not changed that at all. The only thing that the only way it has impacted it is by more students, more first-year beds being held, right? It's the only reason that you might not be able to. Other reasons that you might not be able to stay same include things like taking a building offline for maintenance, or there's a variety of reasons why you might not be able to do it, but those are all still the same reasons that have always been the same reasons, right? So I think that one's answered. So we'll notify the residents if you can't choose to stay same. We're going to let you know that, and then give you, like I said, an earlier time ticket for self-assign. But again, please remember that specific housing is never guaranteed. I mean, even after you've been assigned to a room and moved in, we can reassign you to another space if we need to. And there are lots of reasons why that might happen, and those are all listed as well in the contract. So you can revisit that if that's news to you, or if that's something that you didn't know about before. So we had some questions in the survey of, what if I just desperately need to live on campus? What do I do? And what you should do is apply just the minute that your phase opens. So when you're eligible to apply, you should do that the very first thing that morning, right? You should be on the computer applying the minute that you have the opportunity, so that you can hopefully ensure that you're able to live on campus. And then we had questions about what resources are going to be available for off-campus housing and how we're going to provide more resources. So we're working on this as quickly as we can, and we're working with the Institute to identify the ways that we can engage with off-campus housing. As a state institute, we are limited in how we can endorse or appear to endorse other companies. And so we have to be very careful about how we do that, but we are committed to doing everything in our power to helping students understand what options are available to them, how to secure the best off-campus housing, and what they need to do to make that happen. Start as early as we possibly can in January, making that happen for you. So I can't give you the absolute specifics on how we're going to do it, but we are going to do it, and we're committed to that. And we want everybody to be clear and understand that we are committed to that, and that we're working really hard to start as soon as we possibly can in January, so that students do know options and do have other options if that's necessary for them. So we had some questions about single suites. So we're still making decisions regarding the single suites. If they are available, it will probably be less than what we had available this year. And then will first-year students live in apartments? There are some circumstances where first-year students will live in apartments. It's very minimal, but that is a possibility, and we are looking at everything as an option at this point. And then we had questions about our long-term housing plans to address the growth in enrollment. And so, just know that this is not something that we just started working on today. We have submitted a 5-year plan that includes building new housing. It's under review, and that's where we are. We can't make any announcements about anything that's coming because we don't know yet. We don't know what's going to be approved and how that will all play out. But we're making every effort to meet the demand of students at Georgia Tech for on-campus housing. And then will graduate housing be impacted? So we really anticipate that graduate students will be impacted very, very little by the changes. But depending on when students are admitted and they apply for housing, then they may not get space on campus, right? That's the reality of it. The later students apply, the less likely they are to have a place. If you're a current undergrad who will be a graduate student in the fall, you should apply for housing as soon as your phase opens on January 14th if you're a current resident. And the application is the same one that you've always used, so you'll apply for that. Now, the only separate application is Family Monthly. And so if students are applying for that, that's not impacted at all by this, and their timelines are different, and you would want to go on to the Family Monthly page of the website and review that if you're looking at those apartments. So those were the questions that came up from the survey that we sent out. And so now is an opportunity for you here live today to ask us questions that you have. And so I think Kate will probably open that up for you, and she's going to be asking those questions out loud for Jenny, for Dr. Cotton and I, so we can respond.
That's right, Carrie. I've just opened up the Q&A, so if folks who are watching want to navigate over to the Q&A form and submit their questions, we will use that to take any further questions. Although my hope is we've already answered all of them.
That's my hope too, but also remember that you can go to the website. We have a pretty extensive FAQ there that goes into a lot of details about, if you're in a living learning community, or, questions that are really specific to individuals that might answer more of your questions if you're looking for that. And I think we can probably drop that into something, the link to that in the FAQ to share. Or the Q&A, I'm sorry.
We can certainly do that. I'll do that right now. We have had a question come in, Carrie. Since we would have to leave our current on-campus housing during the summer, since it's not part of our contract, can we still apply for Stay Same for fall 22 if we're eligible?
Yes. So that's that. So the process is if you're currently in an academic year contract, like I said, right now, today, on November 30th, you live in Creesign 225. And when you apply for fall, you will have the ability to stay same. Now, obviously, you're not going to be in that building for the summer, but you're choosing to go back to that room in the fall, meaning that I want to keep this room and I want to live here again. And so that will be an option for students who have an academic year contract now applying for an academic year contract for fall 22, spring 23. So our contracts are summer, and then there's the academic year. So we have several summer, right? Early, full, late, right? and then there's academic year.
All right, Carrie, we've had a few more coming in that are coming up. Will this affect RA applications in any way?
No.
Excellent. And will this change, the single suites, will they be available for second years in any cases?
Yes, very, very limited though. Very, very limited. But they would be available to all upper class students, so all non-first year students.
All right. Bear with me, folks, as we start to, we've got a lot of questions coming through, so we'll make our way through all of them. The next question is, how would study abroad work if we leave for the fall but want to stay on in the spring?
So if you leave for the fall, you would apply for spring housing. So we don't have technically there's not a fall and a spring contract, but there is actually a spring contract for students who don't live with us in the fall. So right now we have about, for example, we have about just over 400 students who are leaving in the fall. They're graduating, they're studying abroad, interning, co-oping for the spring, right? So they are actually moving out. So the students who are moving in are students who applied for spring housing. So that application will open up early in the fall, and students will be able to apply, or it's mid-fall, it's in October. And so if you're studying abroad, you would, in the fall, or intern co-oping, you would just not apply for housing in the spring at all. You would wait and you would apply in October for just spring housing.
All right, thank you. It looks like the next question we have is, if I become a grad student in the spring semester, am I still allowed to stay in the same undergrad apartment for the spring and live out my academic year contract?
Yes.
Excellent. The next question is about Gray and Hayes and whether those are reserved specifically for international students.
They're not international students, it's iHouse. So it is reserved for the Living Learning Community iHouse, and then Stein and Golden are WIST, the Women's Science and Technology Living Learning Community.
Excellent. All right. The next question is from a graduate student living in 10th and home, wants to know what the timeline for their application would be, if that's the February 21st or the March 8th deadline.
It would be if they're currently in 10th and home, it would be the February, they'd be able to apply starting February 14th.
Excellent. There's a question about if there's a handful of seniors or graduating students in 10th and home who are moving out, how do you determine who will get to stay of those folks? Is there anything that we do to determine who gets to continue to live with us next year? I think it's a timeline question for me.
If they're moving out now for the fall?
It's if we need to have folks move out, how do we decide who has to move out and does not get to continue to live with us? Is the question.
We're not deciding who that is. It's based on the application itself. So if you apply and are not placed on the wait list, then you would have a place in housing. We're using the available beds we have, and matching that up with the number of students who apply. And so once we reach capacity, we turn the wait list on. So it is a first come, first serve. What we have done is phased it, so that students who meet these certain criteria can apply by certain dates.
All right, I'm looking for our next question here. This may be a pretty general question, but do you anticipate having enough housing for the typical number of current residents who register on time and want to stay on campus for the next year?
No. I mean, that's why we're doing this. No, we don't. We anticipate that we will have to start the wait list earlier than we've ever had to start it during the typical timeline, this early spring timeline of applications.
Excellent, thank you. The next question is about whether traditional halls like Fulmer that have typically had transfers, upperclassmen, and first years mixed together, will halls like that become first year only?
Yes, they will become first year only.
And for LLCs, what is the deal going to be for reserving housing blocks for second year LLC alumni? Explore was the specific question asked, but I think it applies to all.
Yeah, so so students who want to live in their upper class blocks, they will need to apply during their phase of housing application. And when you apply, you will see as a LLC student, you're coded that way. And so you will be able to see on your application the option of, I would like to live with my upper class community in whichever block that is, whichever building that is. And if you select that and you apply on time and are not put on the wait list, then you would be placed in that block for your LLC. So it doesn't impact you as far as the timeline or anything else. You need to apply when your phase opens. And if you're a rising second year, then you'll be able to start applying on January 31st, and you need to do that. You need to get in and apply as soon as your phase opens.
I think the next question that we had come up in the queue is a question about housing costs going down. I had heard that there was a rumor about costs going down. Is that true?
Our rents are not changing for next year.
Excellent. The next question is, if I'm graduating and returning for the BS-MS program, can I stay with my same undergraduate roommates, or am I treated like a new student?
You are treated like a grad student, and so you would be a new grad, and you would apply, as a grad student at that point. I say that the caveat there is that oftentimes you're applying before you've been if you've already been admitted to the program, that's one thing. If you are waiting for admission, that's where things get tricky. We go ahead and let you apply as an undergrad, and then we convert you to a grad once you're admitted. So it's really going to matter, what that process is. For MSBS, it's a little bit different because it's a part of the process and you just keep going. And I think typically we've given students the option to either stay with their undergrad roommates or move over to grad housing. Again, it's a matter of applying when your phase opens. As a current resident, you'll be able to start applying on February 14th. That's what you need to do if you want to be able, and then we'll work out the details of where you live after you get a confirmed application and you're not on the wait list. Then we can really dig down into where you want to live. Yeah.
Awesome. The next question is about gender inclusive housing and if that is affected at all by any of these changes.
It's not affected at all. We hold that space and we'll continue to hold that space. It will be available in all of the buildings where we can make it available, and it won't be impacted.
Excellent. The next question we have that we haven't answered yet is, will applications for the 2022 summer contract be concurrent with the academic year contract? What's the relationship there?
We open the summer one a little bit later. We get you through the fall application period first. And so once that concludes, then we will open the summer application. We haven't set that date. We may have set that date internally. I don't have it right in front of me, but it'll be just after the fall application. Again, we don't officially close it. People can continue to apply, but the deadlines for actually being able to self-assign and that sort of thing. So once that happens, we'll open that summer application.
Wonderful, thank you. I see we have a question here about having this session being recorded, and we've already dropped a link in the chat, so if anybody wants to follow that, they'll be able to find this recording after the fact at that link that Dr. Kotz posted for us. Which brings me to the next question, which is, for returning graduate students, will there be secondary criteria such as duration of stay, or will all graduates have the same chance to live in graduate housing?
They will all have the same chance based on when they apply.
So similarly, a first come, first serve situation. Okay. The next question is that since roommate selection happens after registration for rising second years, should we try to sign up for the same room as our roommates during registration? What happens if there are only single spots left and we cannot sign up together? So I think maybe a clarification about the registration application versus roommate selection and self-assigned process, please.
Yep. So actually you're applying for housing. You're not selecting a roommate or a room during this first phase. All you're doing is saying, I want to live on campus. That happens first. That's what's happening on these phase dates of January 31st, February 14th, February 21st, right? Then after that part, after people have an actual application, then they're able, if they don't get put on the wait list, you have a confirmed contract, you're not on the wait list. On February 21st, you'll have the opportunity to select a roommate, so you can pick who you'd like to live with. Then after that's all done in March, then you'll get to pick your room. So if Kate and I are roommates and we want to stay roommates, we both apply for housing. separate process. We don't even see each other, that there's no roommate or room selection during that process. And then after we both have applications and neither of us are on the wait list, then we pick each other as a roommate. And if I am the roommate, the group leader for our apartment, let's say Dr. Cotton and Dr. Gibson are also going to be there with us, then I would assign us to that room and pull in all 3 of my roommates with me. Right. So so whoever has the most credit hours, meaning the highest time ticket, that's the person who you want to be your group leader, and they'll pull you into your room. But everybody has to have a signed contract and not be on the wait list to be able to see each other. And then if Kate is in Explore and I'm in Grand Challenges and we both said we wanted to live with our living learning community blocks, we won't be able to see each other. We'll only be able to see people who are in our community. So be sure that if you want to live in your LLC block and you have a specific roommate in mind, that roommate has to also be in the LLC, right? You need to think of it like you're apples and everybody else is oranges, and everybody in that LLC with you is an apple, right? And only apples can live with apples. So you really want to think about, what that looks like, because that's all coded in the system, right? So that only people who, when you go through that process, each of those processes, the roommate selection, the self-assign, we do the same thing with the room. We tag the room with the same LLC tag, right? So only you can say, it's the same thing with GIH. If you're in gender inclusive housing, the same thing happens. You can only see other people who are also chosen to live in a gender inclusive housing, and then you can only see rooms that are a part of gender inclusive housing. So you want to think about those pieces of it, but really the most important part, and none of that matters while you're applying. All you're doing is raising your hand and signing the contract saying, I want to live on campus in the fall.
Excellent. I appreciate that detailed response, Dr. White. I would also mention to students that we are working on just better educational materials about how this process works and how you can be most successful in it, that we will be releasing in the spring so that we don't bombard you with too much just yet. The next question we have is for students who know that they can't stay in their same room because it's either second year experience or LLC or what have you. Would I be a part of that group that you said would get priority self-assigned for a new space?
Potentially, yes.
And then the next question we've had come in is whether or not single suites are available for second years. And can you speak a little bit, since we've had a few questions about that, just in terms of general inventory for single suites?
So even this year, there are very, very few single suites available, right? And that inventory may go down next year. And remember that we are often required to make accommodations for students who are registered with disability services, who need, private rooms or private bathrooms and that sort of thing. And so if we do have inventory like that, it's often designated for students who are required through disability services or other have other needs. So if you look online and you say, oh, there's 56 single suites available, in the inventory, that might be true. It might mean that some of those are already designated for disability services, for other things. So just know that, yes, second years could have the ability, to select that, but second year students are going to be very low on the self-assign process because of their number of credit hours at Georgia Tech. And so it's unlikely that a rising second year student would be able to select a type of housing that is very limited to start with when they're very going to be going through that process much later than everyone else. So possible, yes. Probable, no.
Excellent. The next question we've had is from someone who would like to be a roommate with someone who's transferring in. Is that impossible if they are in the Honors LLC and their hopeful roommate is transferring?
If their hopeful roommate is transferring, the student in the honors program would not be able to live with the upper class honors program if they want to live with someone who's not in the honors program. The person transferring in, could very likely get a room because we're going to be having space for those students. But you wouldn't be able to live with them if you want to live with the honors program. If you don't want to live with the honors program and you want to live with the student transferring in, then you would just assign yourself to a general room. Now what's going to happen is your room might fill up, right, with the people you don't know, and then you'll go through a room swap in the summer, and you and your intended roommate, the transfer student, would then get together at that point. And people do it all the time. It works, I promise. You'll be able to make it work if that's what you want to do, and we'll help. The assignments office is really great. They will help you. They'll help you work it out, and try their very best to help you live where you want to live.
I appreciate that nod to your team, who gives such great customer service in managing some of these more individual cases.
Yep, absolutely.
The next question we've had come up is a good one, I think, for us to reiterate. Does registering for housing commit a student to the contract? Oh, wait, I'm trying to read this correctly. Does registering for housing commit a student to the housing contract before picking a room? With so many people expected to be on the wait list, will you let people out of a contract if they don't like the options available when it comes time to select a room?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're working on the cancellation penalty schedule. I can go ahead and tell you it will be later. So typically what would happen in past years is once you've applied in the springtime, so you've applied for housing, right, in February, let's say, and then you go through the process, and let's say in March or April you decide to cancel, there would be some fee for you to cancel. Because of all of this, turnover and the process changes, and we know that students are going to be able to make other choices and looking for other options, we're going to wait much later to charge any of those penalties. So what I will say right now is we're working on those, and we'll get that out as soon as we have confirmation and all the leadership approvals that we need to give you that exact timeline. But know that we understand it, we care about it, we want you to have that flexibility, and we're working to make sure that you do. Now, will there be at some point a cutoff where if you cancel, you're going to be penalized with some fee? Absolutely. I mean, we just have to do that. But it won't be as early as what it has typically been in the past. And we're going to make every effort to give you time to make that decision that's best for you.
Excellent. I appreciate, again, the nuance of that important question. The next question is, can a graduate student currently living in a shared apartment in 10th and Home apply for one of the single room apartments?
Yes.
All right, that's a nice easy one then.
Yes.
We do have one more that's come in, and I know we want to prod folks to submit any lingering questions they may have, because we've got a couple minutes left still. But this last question that has come in is someone who's come in late, and I'm wondering if you can give them a high-level overview again of this question of who we are prioritizing and how. And what I was going to do is flip back to that slide that has those answers on it. So if you'll bear with me for a minute, Carrie, and start responding, I will get us back to the slide in question. Sure.
So we are really, our primary considerations are new students. So that's first year, new transfer, new grad, rising second years, need-based students, and then students who are planning to graduate in December, or who are planning to study abroad, co-op, or intern in the spring. Now, I will reiterate that we don't know in the springtime who those students are, so it will be up to students who that applies to get their applications in early. Now, when we get down to July and we have space available and our wait list is cleaned up, then there might be opportunity. But the message to you all is that if that applies to you, or you think it does, you need to apply as soon as your phase opens. Now we do know who these other students are, right? Need-based, rising second year, new grad, new transfer, and first year. However, I'll say this, we've already made our process to accommodate this as much as we can. We're not going to be massaging that on the back end. We are really using this phased approach of the application itself to meet this need of our primary considerations for students. And that's how we're addressing it now, right now, this year, you know, and we'll revisit it. I mean, there are other ways to do this. There are other ways that other campuses manage, you know, high demand. And in the past at Georgia Tech, even there was a lottery system, right? Before we had the housing on and North Ave, before we had the Olympic housing that was built for the Olympics, Georgia Tech had a lottery system. That's not something that we'd like to implement again if we don't have to. We really want to be able to offer housing to everybody who wants it, honestly. And then if we can't do that, we want to be able to offer it to those students who we know really need it, you know, the most, who are really in most need of on-campus housing services. And that's where we've started with this primary consideration list.
Great. We have had another question come in that is blissfully not necessarily about allocation, just a tip for how to manage the process. The question is, if my future roommate and I both currently live on campus, but in different buildings, what happens if one of us chooses stay same? Does the other roommate get pulled into that apartment, assuming there's an opening and that they are both not on the wait list? I appreciate the person's detailed question.
Yes, yes, they would. So as a roommate group, so when you stay same, you're kind of out of the roommate selection process at that point. So that person would need to self-assign into the empty room, right? And like you said, assuming there's empty space and that everybody has a contract and that nobody's on the wait list, they would be able to. And then if they don't get in at that point, room swap is definitely out there, right? That's still part of the process and an option, and something that makes it very possible for students who aren't able to get together at the beginning to then get together later. So I encourage you to really look for those timelines and when that opens up so that you can then start, you know, working that process.
Excellent. Well, it looks like we have reached the end of our questions, or at least unless someone can sneak one in while we are kind of closing things out. I am going to drop the link to the applicant FAQ page one more time into the chat for folks to follow and to be able to find this recording, as well as updates to these FAQs that they are helping us populate. If there's anything else you want to say in closing, Dr. White?
No, I just appreciate y'all coming and you know, asking your questions. You know, keep doing that. Send us questions at information@housing.gatech.edu. Look at those FAQs, read them clearly, and know that we're doing everything we can to make this process as smooth as possible and accommodate, you know, as many students as we possibly can. So y'all have a great Tuesday, and I hope that finals go well for you.